the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. Today, joining us is a special guest, Alexandros Itimoudis. He's a geopolitical analyst and consultant in Greece. We'll be discussing with him a very interesting topic, the issue of how the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea are benefiting Russia, and both directly and indirectly by compromising, for instance, European Union interests and the trade with the India and various economic activity in the region and related issues. And we will be starting with a PowerPoint presentation. And as we are turning towards it, and I'm sharing, I'm going to turn over the screen. Just 1 second. All right, let's see. Alexandros, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, how you've come to study this area and look into this particular topic.
Thank you, Mrs. Zuckerman. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. As you mentioned before, I'm a geopolitical analyst currently located in Greece. I have to apologize if I commit some errors because English is not my maternal language. So it's the first time that I make introduction in English. So I want to apologize for any type of error. So I'm a geopolitical analyst. My specialty is on Eastern Mediterranean, more specifically in Greek-Turkish relations, and generally the Middle East background, and of course the Iranian influence in Middle East, and generally the cultural influence and the cultural geopolitical pillar of power. This is my whole expertise. And as you mentioned before, I'm also a consultant. I make some geopolitical reports considering various facts. And I need to mention that I use geopolitics and comparative historical analysis. This is my method and my tools when I'm trying to do geopolitical analysis. So I'm going to introduce you, if I may, the presentation. If I can
yes,
make
please.
the presentation.
You should be able to share the slides now by the share screen.
Okay, I suppose that you can see my screen.
Yes, excellent.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the EU-Indian trade deal and the disruption that this deal has faced due to Houthi attacks. And of course, there is a beneficiary. In my opinion, Russia is a big beneficiary by these attacks. And I'm going to explain with some slides what's happening. I'm going to start from the general, and I'm going to specify as we walk. So I hope that you see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. So let's make a small introduction. When we are talking about geopolitics, we have various theories in our head. At this moment, we're going to use the classical geopolitical theory. This map shows exactly this specific geopolitical theory, having published by Mackinder and Spikeman. I think those who know about geopolitics, they know the English and the American theoretical of this theory. So we have the outer crescent, and we have the pivot area. The pivot area represents the land powers, and the outer marginal crescent represents the sea powers. What we have here is that the land powers, they try to penetrate the outer crescent in order to get an access to the seas. This is the theoretical background, and I mention it because it's going to be really helpful as we walk in our analysis. So let's move on. So the first one is the changing landscape of global trade. Houthi attacks is something crucial, as these attacks they have provoked some shifts, some geopolitical and economical shifts which have many implications in the global background, in the global war as we are here now. So first of all, we have the One Belt, One Road. I think this is something really common. We have China, which China's economic rise has been accompanied by a significant increase in its trade influence. So this has led some countries to worry about the overdependence on China and the potential for China to use its economic power for political gain. So the first thing we should keep in our mind is that China's dominance in global trade has been growing for decades. The BRI has two forms. The first form is through land, and the second one is by sea. So there is a concern about the reliance on a single source for goods. I need to mention that China right now is a very big market. The USA, they're trying to make a de-risking strategy by taking some companies and put them to India. But this is another topic. This is another big analysis. And of course, this landscape formed by Chinese trade strategy has a potential political and economic pressure on various states. And this is something that we have to keep it in our mind, because China is a beneficiary, of course, but this presentation has to do how Russia is a beneficiary of what's happening in the Red Sea. So let's move on and let's see another topic. I'm gonna try to put the pieces of the puzzle, and as we walk, we're gonna understand how Russia is a beneficiary. We are talking about the Red Sea in Africa. So let's see what's happening in Africa. In Africa, we have a cooperation, let's say. We have to analyze how China and Russia leverage their strengths, mainly diplomacy and economics, to establish some spheres of influence. So I have those two maps. The one map representing the presence of Wagner Group. Wagner Group is a private military company, a Russian private military company. This is the presence that it has in Africa. And the second picture is the trading partner of each African country. As we can see, China is the main trade partner. So we have, let's say, a cooperation between Russia and China in Africa in order to establish some spheres of influence. China has actively cultivated a relationship with African nations for decades through extensive diplomatic reach and economic initiatives. BRI is one of them, by the way. And China has become a major player in African development. On the other side, Russia's approach to Africa differs from China. Russia utilizes the Wagner Group to exert influence. I have to mention that Russia is not such a powerful actor in terms of economic power. So the pillar of power that Russia uses a lot is the military power through Wagner Group and some other groups, of course. And Russia primarily leverages private military companies to establish a presence. This can be used to secure access to resources, counter Western influence, and potentially destabilize regions where Russia has competing interests with the Western powers. So we have a complementary and not competitive cooperation between Russia and China in Africa. Africa is an important region. This is another topic, of course, of analysis, but we should keep that in mind as we walk. So let's see now the scramble for strategic waterways. It's another clue that we need to know. These are the primary global maritime choke points. As you can see, two of the main choke points lying on the Red Sea and, of course, the Suez Canal. I mentioned this map because Houthis Houthis attacks right now has disrupted the global maritime trade route. The number 6 Bab-el-Mandeb Strait on the Red Sea is a very crucial one. Almost 20% of the global maritime passes through the Red Sea. So Houthi attacks pose a great risk for the global maritime. It's something really important, especially for the Western powers and especially for the European ones. Keep that in mind. Maritime choke points are strategic bottlenecks through which a large percentage of global trade flows. Controlling a choke point allows a power to significantly disrupt the movement of goods and exert pressure on rival nations. And of course, they offer strategic leverage. This is something really important. The control of key choke points offers, by the way, a military power projection and of course an open access to trade routes. That's why China's Belt and Road Initiative has two parts, the land one and the sea one. Now, I mentioned what is the cooperation between the two land powers, Russia and China. We have the Houthi attacks, we have the cooperation in Africa. So we can see how the puzzle is being formed. Now, what was the West's answer to this? We have some answer by the West. The answer is the EU-India Middle East corridor. This is the answer of the collective West in order to, let's say, to pose an obstacle to BRI, of course, and in order to keep China controlled and, of course, blocking Russia from coming to hot waters. This is a very big trade deal. It contains a lot of nations. It contains some very specific strategic locations, and of course, the big prize is India. I need to mention right here that India is, let's say, a balander country, because it lies between the big masses of Eurasia and the Great Seas. So the Western powers, they are trying to take India by their side. But India also plays sometimes with the land powers, even though India has a rivalry, especially with China. So I'm going to put the other map so as to make the comparison. Now we can see the Middle East Europe corridor and Belt and Road Initiative. So in the second map, we can notice that this plan is a crucial one. When we are talking about geopolitics, we need to focus on trade routes. Trade routes plays an extremely important role when you are talking about geopolitical power and geopolitical influence. So the strategic implications of this deal, considering its potential to create a new trade corridor, counter China's trade influence, and align with the recent normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. We should not forget that. In order to have a complete India, Middle East, Europe corridor, Saudi Arabia and Israel, they need to normalize their relations. It's something really important, because the Arabian Peninsula is a very strategic location as we speak about this trade deal. So the EU-India trade deal will create a new trade corridor connecting two of the world's largest and most populous regions. This will provide businesses on both sides with access to new markets and opportunities. It will also reduce trade barriers, making it easier and cheaper for businesses to export and import goods. The increased trade flows could also lead to new investment opportunities and collaboration between EU and India companies. So this is a very big deal generally for Europe. And we have to keep in our mind that France is the main power that it's really interested about this deal. I'm going to mention it as we walk. So we have the deal, we have the West's answer. Now, let's see the role of France. France is a very crucial country. As you know, in Europe, France right now, let's say, is the leader. After Germany got a very big loss after the eruption of the war in Ukraine. So, in EU-India trade deal and France's influence, let's see what we have now. I have two maps. The first map represents the bubbles of influence of France. This is how I call them, the bubbles of influence of French of the French power. And the second one is the land corridor, part of the EU-India deal, which comes through the Arabian Peninsula. So, France has a long-standing strategic interest in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. It has established a strong diplomatic ties and military partnerships, by the way, with many countries, and recent high-profile defense deals such as the sale of Rafale fighter jets. There was a big packet of sales of Rafale to Greece, to Egypt, to the UAE. India also is willing to purchase Rafale jets. So the France uses the Rafale, the military pillar, in order to establish some spheres of influence. But it's not only this. After the military influence, it comes the economic influence. So France is trying to leverage this EU-India trade deal in order to expand its influence. By selling these advanced fighter jets to countries like India and Egypt, France deepens its relationships with these strategic partners. So, France emerges as a key player in the EU, as it has been a strong advocate for this deal. From a strategic standpoint, France seizes the EU-India trade deal as aligning with its interests in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, potentially creating a more stable and prosperous region. This is the French plan as for the region. That's why the EU-India trade deal it's highly important for the French. Now, let's move on to the Houthi attacks. So, what we have now is that the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea have created a major problem, but this is widely known. The Red Sea is a critical shipping lane connecting Europe and Asia, and these attacks have significantly impacted the movement of goods between these continents. This has led to increased shipping costs, delays of deliveries, and potential shortages of essential goods. This is the first part of the game. There are concerns that the Houthi attacks are not just about disrupting global trade, but also about sabotaging the recently signed EU-India trade deal. It has not to do only with Israel-Hamas war, because the Houthis say we are attacking on the ships because we want to prevent Israeli flagged ships or generally Western ships from delivering goods to Israel. But it's not only this. The Houthis is an actor which serves, I think, in my opinion, greater interests. And by the way, their attacks have caused a great disruption on EU-India trade deal. This is the big case for me. So, by disrupting the flows in the Red Sea, the Houthis could potentially hinder the success of the deal and benefit China's economic interests or even Russia's. Let's see how this will happen. What we have now after the Houthi attacks? After the Houthi attacks happened, there was, of course, a disruption. Okay, this is something that we all know. But what's happening with Russia? So there are some clues, some reportages from Financial Times that they say that demand for Russia's transcontinental rail cargo trade has surged by 40%. This is a very big surge for Russia. It seems that this represents a strategic opportunity for Russia to strengthen its economic ties with both Asia and Europe, potentially increasing its influence in the region. This is a very big deal for Russia. I need to mention that the EU sanctions has banned road freight to and from Russia and Belarus, but there is no problem if we speak about railway. So it seems that with disruptions in maritime shipping, logistics companies are increasingly turning to Russia's transcontinental rail network to move goods from Asia to Europe. This is something that, of course, benefits a lot Russia. It's something that it was not expected, I think. The majority of the actors have already imposed sanctions on Russia, but it seems that the Houthi attacks have benefited Russia, although there are many sanctions. Now, let's make a small comparison between the two deals. We have a reshaped trade routes and the new geopolitical landscape after the Houthi attacks and the benefit that Russia has gained. Now, the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, it seems that they have created a ripple effect with complex diplomatic and economic implications. Let's try to unpack this situation. So, this situation represents a fascinating dialectic. On the one hand, we have the Houthi attacks, that they have created problems for the EU-India trade deal. The disruption of the Red Sea directly impacts this newly formed trade deal. This deal has championed by France, aimed to create a new trade corridor, countering China's dominance and even Russian one. France finds itself in a difficult situation as it strongly supports the EU-India trade deal, which aligns with its vision of a multipolar world order. However, the Red Sea disruptions undermine this goal and benefit Russia, a potential strategic competitor. This disruption has led to an unexpected benefit for Russia. And we have some conclusions arisen by this situation. The first one is the Houthi attacks have fundamentally altered the landscape of global trade, as the Red Sea is no longer considered as safe and reliable as before. This has led businesses and governments to explore alternative routes, prompting a strategic shift in global trade partners. The second conclusion, France, which has already established a military presence in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Arabian Peninsula, sees this deal as strategically important. However, the disruptions caused by Houthi attacks threaten the deal's success, potentially undermining French strategic interests in the region. The third conclusion, as maritime shipping becomes less attractive, logistics companies are turning to Russia's extensive railway network to transport goods. So we have a big winner by the Houthi attacks, Russia, because not only has sabotaged EU-India trade deal, but also faces a huge surge of 40%, as I mentioned before, on its railway cargo. So the disruptions in the Red Sea provide China and Russia with an opportunity to showcase the BRI's value, and of course the Russian railway, as a reliable alternative. I think this is what we should keep in our mind. The Houthi attacks they have not to do only with Israel and Hamas war, as many people believe, but also it has created a shifted geopolitical landscape, which has to do with the economy, a very important pillar, and of course has caused some problems to France. That's why Mr. Macron recently have raised his voice against Russia, because many people wonder why France wants to send troops to Ukraine. Why is that? That's why. Because France has strategic interests, and Houthi attacks has caused a very big problem to French plans, benefiting Russia, of course. I think that's all. It was a short presentation. I want to be short enough. I think we can have a discussion right now.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this absolutely fascinating insights. And I really sincerely hope you will write a book about this, because this topic is not, in my opinion, being treated properly externally, because this is the first time I see some of these questions being addressed, period, and giving answer to clear things. There's been a lot of political speculation about why Macron is doing this and that, but actually this is the first time I'm seeing a clear geopolitical reason for his actions, not just, issues of personal ego or attempting to compensate for losses in West Africa and things of that nature, or election related concerns in France. So that's very important. So I kind of want to zoom out into the bigger picture for a second before kind of looking at different components of your presentation, and take a look at, well, first of all, the theory, the heartland theory that you've described. If you could discuss it in a little more detail for the audiences, especially those who may not be familiar, and see how this picture, these specific economic components fit into this idea of control. Who is actually having the more geopolitical influence? Yes, I mean, Russia on the one hand is a beneficiary of these specific developments. On the other hand, it's short on the resources in many respects. So how do these complementary relationships with China, with whoever else, how are they? What is the takeaway in terms of who ends up being most in control in light of that theory?
As I mentioned before, the heartland theory, even though it's an old theory, I think in the times that we live right now, it comes to the surface. Even now, it comes to the surface. We have, as I mentioned, we have I will not say a strategic relationship between Russia and China, but we have a complementary relationship. Even though I think that in the near future, Russia will come under China's influence if we move on like this. Of course, Russia for now is a beneficiary, not only because of the Houthi attacks. Imagine that if there were not the Houthi attacks, let's say that the Houthis have not been attacked to the ships, then Russia wouldn't have been a beneficiary. This happens because of the Houthi attacks. Why is that? Because Iran, it's the spearhead of this, let's say, triangle cooperation. We have Russia, we have China, and we have Iran. Iran lies on a very strategic location, the Middle East, and it's been used by the land powers through Houthis in order to disrupt not only the global trade, but also benefit Russia and China. So what we have now? We have now the land power, let's say we have the Eurasia trying to penetrate, as I told when I started my presentation, they try to penetrate the bubbles of influence, of Western influence. We can see there is a shifting strategy. We can notice that the USA for now is trying to move its powers to Southeast Asia. This is the main US interest zone for now. So the land powers, they see a window of opportunity, let's say, to penetrate and take the advantage on some regions that they are unstable for a long time. That's why the USA promoted the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords, we can see it in relation with EU-India trade deal, because if the Israel normalize all its relations with the Arab states, then we have the EU-India trade deal. So these deals are complementary, like complementary is the strategic relationship between China and Russia. And what we have keep in our mind is that the USA, the sea power, the main sea power, because we have the land powers on one hand, and on the other hand we have the sea power, the main sea power, which is the USA. The USA tries to, let's say, to order some of its soldiers, for example, the France, to take the burden, to lift the burden on the Eastern Mediterranean down to the Red Sea and to India, because the US, they want to focus on Southeastern Asia. So, in my opinion, this has to do with France and Europe. We see that the weak spot is Europe. Europe for decades, it has not had a strategic plan, and that's why we have all these disruptions, because we have a European Union that strategically is, let's say, a zero. There is no European strategic plan, and this is why the land powers trying to leverage the situation. That's why France, I think, is the only European power that can handle the situation. I think this is the context. I don't know if I have answered your question, but I'm trying to give a big picture.
So it seems to me from what you're saying that, first of all, because of a lack of a real focus on the bigger game being planned, there's a lot of focus on the tactical gains and losses, but a lack of focus on the strategic advancement that these tactical developments are helping. Essentially, Russia, China, plus Iran are making huge territorial geopolitical gains that I think are not being evaluated properly, and European Union, due to its lack of engagement and lack of involvement, is suffering significant losses, not just economically, but also politically. And to that effect, I kind of want to follow up on that a little bit and ask two questions. One, in your opinion, do you think the Abraham Accords should have had some sort of a more clear European component? Because it was almost exclusively focused on, just bilateral relations between Israel and Muslim majority states with US backing, but had a zero substantive element of coordination with Europe, or with anyone else for that matter, India, Africa, and so forth. The second question related to that is the tactical issue of European Union defending its interests now with the guarding the ships operations, and how many of the countries refuse to join the US-led force, and why that is. So you have two parallel unions in the waters, and neither of them is being all that effective, other than just simply protecting some of the ships some of the time. And you also have the apparently divergent interests, which I don't quite understand personally.
So let's move on to the first question. I can mention that the first question is a geopolitical analysis by its own. If we have another presentation, I would have to. I need to have a greater geopolitical analysis. I'm gonna try to answer with my knowledge that I have for now. So I don't think that the Abraham Accords they had to do with the European involvement. I think that it has to do with the Middle Eastern the Middle East location in general. And when I say Middle Eastern region, I'm referring to the cultural aspects of this region. I think that the Americans do not consider some aspects that this region has. Generally speaking, in my point of view, the Americans, they have, let's say, a territorial view of the world. But in Middle East, we do not talk about just territories. We are talking about culture, different cultures and different aspects of psychology, of history. That's why I think that if you want to examine the Middle East, you need a strong historical background. Geopolitics are not enough. So by doing this, by keeping that in our mind, I have to say that the Abraham Accords was something, let's say, really difficult to be implemented, because Israel, of course, it's willing to normalize its ties. This is highly beneficial for Israel. Israel will become a key trade hub by implementing the Abraham Accords, and of course the EU-India trade deal. That's for sure. But the problem, it has to do with Iran. Iran has a very strong cultural and religious influence on the region. This is the main antagonist of Israel. Iran, by the way, is part of BRI. So I think the Abraham Accords is something that it's not something really beneficiary for Iran. That's the first thing. The second thing is that even though the Arabian countries like Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, they do want to normalize their ties with Israel, there is a problem with the population. The population of these countries for long years, they have cultivated a culture against Israel. So this is a very big social problem. How a leader of such a country could push this accord to its people, to his people. I think that this is something really difficult to be implemented. Even though I think that the Abraham Accords could have been implemented, of course, if we have a strategic plan mainly by France. As I mentioned in my presentation, France is a country it's really interested about the Eastern Mediterranean. My country as well, Greece, is really interested about the Eastern Mediterranean. We have Greece, we have Cyprus, which forms a shape of a sphere of influence, let's say, of Western influence, because Greece, Cyprus, and Israel is a common chain. I think that you may know the Eastern Mediterranean corridor, the East Med, which is also a geopolitical plan. So I think yes, France should have given a greater push, let's say, to the Abraham Accords. Now let's move on to the second question. There is an unwillingness from European countries to align with the US power defending the ships in Red Sea. This is a main problem for Europe, but it's not also the problem. Europe right now, as you may know, they tries to ramp up the defense production, and as I can notice, the European countries, they are not capable to ramp up military production. This has to do with years of strategic unwillingness by Europe to lift the burden, the geopolitical burden, because Europe is a very crucial part of the sea powers. It's not only the US and the UK. For long years, the Europe thought that the US, the United States, would have protected Europe. That's why Europe has zero military readiness, has zero military production. Only France keeps a limit. France and Greece. These are the only two countries which has a great air force. They have prepared militaries, but that's not enough. Europe should have worked as a whole. Unfortunately, Europe has been divided by different interests. We have three types of interests in Europe. We have the Mediterranean one, we have the North one, and we have the UK. By the way, UK is is an actor by its own. This unwillingness to send ships on the Red Sea, even though the Houthi attacks affects most of them, the European trade, the US trade is not being affected so much by the Houthi attacks. It's the Europe that has the problem. So this unwillingness for me is not something new. I think Europe should take many more steps in order to shift a strategy. We have only France. I think the France will be the leader if such a strategy arises in the near future.
But why not integrate whatever efforts are being put in place with the US effort? Why have an entirely separate strategy? How is it effective in any way, whether by France or by anybody else?
In my opinion, there is a gap between the US and the Europe. This is a very long conversation. I think that the Europe, and especially France, is really concerned about what's happening right now in Russia and Ukraine, of course. I think Europe was not ready to lift such a burden. And when I'm referring to this, I'm referring to the cooperation between the Europe and Ukraine. As we speak, Ukraine right now faces a big shortage of ammunition, and Europe is not ready. Europe is not ready to offer such ammunition. This has to do with technical reasons. There are no defense industries in Europe. Europe has not spent money on weapons for many years, as I mentioned. So it's a technical reason. I think that Europe wants to help Ukraine, but as we speak now, there is a big problem caused by many factors. One of them is the Ukraine. We can see that only now Macron wants to send, for example, troops in Ukraine. Why? Because we have a disruption of the EU-India trade deal. If there was not any such disruption, Macron would stay on its seat. In my opinion, he would not have said anything. So I think there is a strategic gap. The leaders of the EU, they want to align with the US, but on the other side, we have the people of Europe. I think that you know that Europe faces a lot of problems as for its societies, and I think there is a struggle between the EU leadership and the society. So this strategic gap, I think, for now causes a lot of problems to the Western camp. This is my opinion.
You've mentioned repeatedly the importance of historical context. So let's zoom out of this current event situation and kind of look back on the past, on the importance of these waterways, of the past history of the cooperation with these countries, and also the position of some of the European countries in the Middle East and different parts, and with respect to India as well. I mean, France has had a strong presence in the Levant, but also security presence in Saudi Arabia going back decades. They have had very good relations. They have a growing role with UAE, not perfect and actually sort of new compared to their relations with Saudis, but still very strong. And of course, India has been quite a global presence even before its existing current economic boom. How is this historical context informing the current events, and to the extent that it's being put aside or disregarded, what can be taken away from past relationships that can be used to kind of boost alliances today?
This is a really tough question because if we speak about history, I think that many historical facts does not benefit the Europeans generally. And when we're talking about Europeans, I mainly focus on the Western Europeans, because here for example, in my country, here in Greece, we have a totally different relationship with the East, a totally different relationship, mainly affected by historical factors, of course. So what we have now, I didn't mention before that France was obliged to take away sources from Sahel region. Sahel region was a region historically affected by the French influence. This is something widely known. And France was forced by Russia, of course, and China, and by the society in Sahel countries to take away its forces. So I think that the Europe should make a focus on how to fix its relationship with such countries that right now are going to be crucial parts of a new geopolitical map. For example, India. India for centuries was part of the British Empire, was a British colony, but right now we can see that emerges as a global power, let's say, if not a global power, at least as a global trade power. And I think that such countries will play a crucial role. On the other hand, we have the Arab Peninsula countries, which right now, as we speak, they leverage the situation. They are trying to shift their economies. We have, for example, in Saudi Arabia, for the first time in history, we have a law that was out of context of the Sharia law, which was something that Saudi Arabia has kept for centuries. And right now we have the first law. This is out of Sharia. The United Arab Emirates, for such a long time, it's a global trade hub and technology hub. And right now is trying to become an artificial intelligence hub. So as I mentioned these examples to show you that the outer crescent of the European continent has a great shift. We can see that new powers emerge, and Europe, I think it has been stuck on a past that right now it's not existed anymore. I think in a macro historical aspect, Europe should reinvent itself. It should reinvent itself by posing a new strategy. First of all, by saying which its interests are. I think only France realizes, in some extent, this historical, let's say, this historical cause. That's why France tries to construct a vast, a great chain of influence, as I mentioned in my presentation. And generally, I think that the Europe should fix its relations with people that for a long time they had been hostile towards Europe. I think this is a very hard task, and I think that Europe needs to find a model. In my opinion, a good model would have been the allocation of money to these countries in order to help them to build their infrastructure. I don't think that there is another option for Europe. These countries, they need some kind of assistance. For now, China offers this assistance. The Chinese, they use a very smart strategy. They have realized that those countries contain people that they are full of hate towards the West, and that's why they help them by offering great infrastructure facilities, or by giving them loans. generally China implements a very smart trade strategy. I think that Europe should focus on such a trade strategy if it wants to exert its influence on these regions. I don't think that there's another option.
So you actually quite correctly mentioned India. India is a very much emerging power with a major history of its own, but also affected by all these events. And one of the ways it is affected is that it was actually forced to also defend its own maritime and trade interests from attacks not only by the Houthi Iran, ambitions in the region, but also by common Somali pirates, whether they're independent and taking opportunistic or whether they're coordinating with the Houthis to some extent. The outcome for India is the same. They've been forced into this regional role, and they're neither with the US-led alliance nor with the France alliance. They're providing independent assistance, but they have not yet figured out a concrete strategy in light of all this. But what we do know is that they're also standing to face major economic disruptions if this economic corridor with the Middle East does not materialize, whether due to Houthi attacks, due to failure of Israel-Saudi normalization, or combination of both. So what, in your opinion, role can India play under these circumstances, given Europe's floundering strategy? Can it be provide some sort of a new vision? Can it supplement Europeans or US or both? What can it contribute in light of these challenges, given its own competition with China?
I forget to mention that one of the main factors that have shifted the situation, at least in historical level, is that right now we have a very big spread of technology. This was something that in the past decades or in the past centuries, it was a privilege owned by the Western powers. This is something that we need to keep in our mind, because, for example, right now the Houthis, they are using a hybrid strategy, using low technology weapons, but they can easily do a great damage. So this is something that was not capable to do an actor like Houthis in the past. So I think the spread of the technology has already shifted the geopolitical map, because right now not only the Western powers owns a technology advantage, but also the Eastern powers, let's say the Eastern nations hold such an advantage, even if this advantage is a low-tech one. Now, about your question, can you please repeat? You mentioned how Europe can be aligned with the US in order to counter the land powers. Is this the question?
No, I was referring more to India, and which is not exactly with the US and not exactly with the France led, but it's still playing a role in the, in light of the Houthi attacks. At the same time, it's competing with China. At the same time, it's pursuing its own interests with the Middle East, being affected by the very same factors, Israel-Saudi lack of normalization for the time being, the Houthi attacks, and so forth. So what role can it play? Can it be sort of a bridge between these divergent Western visions? Can it offer something completely new and different? What can it contribute given all these conflicting circumstances?
Yes. Well, India is a very special actor. As I mentioned, it deserves geopolitical analysis by its own. Well, right now, as we speak, India tries to leverage also the situation by shifting its economy. As I mentioned, the US, they're trying to relocate some companies, some big companies like Apple, for example, from China to India. So, in my opinion, India plays, let's say, a pivotal role, plays a balanced role between the two camps, the Western camp and the Eastern camp. Right now, if I can combine it with my presentation, I mentioned that Russia has a surge on its railway. Well, somebody could have had on his mind that okay, India needs to realign with the West in order to maintain the EU-India trade deal. That's wrong. India can also use the land powers in order to relocate its goods. So India can play a balanced role and say, okay, I can move my goods, I can move my exports to Europe through Russia. So I think the Western powers they need to struggle to take India by its own side. In my opinion, India it has a friendly, let's say, a friendly stance towards the West, towards the West. I can mention a fact that it's really crucial. In these months, as we speak, the India for years had purchased Russian weapons. Okay, right now India has made a big shift. It started to purchase American weapons. This is a really important clue in our analysis, because we have the de-risking strategy, relocating companies to India, and on the other hand, we have India purchase American weapons for the first time. I think that India could be a very good partner for the Western world. I don't think that India will have to. I don't think India wish to break its relations with Russia. I think India sees Russia as a strategic partner, because those two countries are really linked. They have relationship for many years, and we should also consider the fact that India needs Russia in order to counter China. So India without Russia, I don't think it's something that the Indian government wants to break its relations with Russia. I think India will always maintain a relationship with Russia. We should not forget that as we speak right now, Russian oil is being transferred through India. India plays a role in evading Western sanctions, like the United Arab Emirates. By the way, the United Arab Emirates also helps Russia to transport its oil. So I think India will try to maintain the EU-India trade deal. It's something that really benefits India, but also it will keep a good relationship with Russia. As for the Houthi attacks right now, Indian Navy plays a special role. As you may know, India has already sent 12 ships on the Red Sea in order to prevent general attacks, not only Houthi attacks, general attacks. Why I'm saying that? Because India maintains a good relationship with Iran. This is something that the majority of the people does not know it, but India has a good relationship with Iran also, not only with Russia. So we have three types of fleet right now on the Red Sea: the US-UK fleet, the European fleet, and the Indian fleet. So the fleets shows us that there are three types of strategic, let's say, of strategic thinking, and the two of them, the European one and the American one, let's say, they are together. But there is also India, who plays a balanced role, as I mentioned. I think that India generally knows that the next years will become a major trade power. It knows that for sure. So I think it's trying to leverage the situation. It's trying to maintain good relationships with both sides. And I think this situation benefits also India, because on the other hand, India has Russia with the railway, and on the other hand, it has the European powers who try to to make the EU-India trade deal a reality. I think India is the great prize for the West. I think this is my opinion.
And actually, getting back to your model of historical comparisons, this effort to bring two parallel models into place. One is the China's Silk Road. On the other hand, you have the India, Europe, Middle Eastern corridor. Also, they call it the Spice Road. Kind of looking back at the history, but going back to the ancient day, these Spice/Silk Road initiatives were actually part of the one and the same globalized trade component. And China has tried to kind of hijack the narrative by placing itself at the center of a renewed, transportation and logistic routes. But in reality, many different interests had a role to play, and now India is kind of trying to grab this concept from the other end. If you were to overlay the ancient maps of the original Silk Road with the current these parallel to interests, what would we see, and what could it teach us about the global approach to these geopolitical concerns and the current tensions underlying them?
Well, yes, the Silk Road is not something new. The BRI represents the old trade routes. This is something that anyone who knows history knows that. I think that right now the change that we have in macro-historical, of course, in a macro-historical aspect, is that we have right now the great sea power. The great sea power represented by the US and the UK does not desire China to have, let's say, a connection with Europe through the BRI. We're talking about strategy right now. We do not say that if something is wrong or bad. This is the strategic implication. The sea power does not want the land powers to connect with Europe. So I think that there is also a trap. The Western powers they were trying through the global trade to shape the world towards their interests, but they made a great mistake. They thought that by moving their companies and their industries to the Asia, it would have been a very good source of cheap labor force. But unfortunately, the Asian countries took the opportunity to industrialize their economies, to produce good products. Unfortunately, and of course, problems arise when an actor, a geopolitical actor, gains too much trade power in terms of trade, of course. The Chinese government realizes that it has something on its hands, that it's very powerful. It tried to implement a strategy that many other countries were willing to accept. As you may know, trade is something that it does not contain weapons, it does not contain force. So I think the West came with a situation that it was highly, let's say, it was highly strange. It was on a macro-historical aspect, of course. I think that the West will face some problems about this. This is my opinion, especially the Europe, because the Europe has de-industrialized for a long time. Being industrialized is something hard, and de-industrialized something easy to do. I don't think that Europe I primarily focus on Europe because the USA maintains an industrial base as we speak. It has some sorts of power, but the problem is the Europe because the Europe is the bridge to Euro-Asia continent for the US. So the main problem is the Europe. For example, I'm mentioning an example. For this aspect, the Europe will need almost 20 years in order to construct a defense industry. 20 years. Imagine how many years will be required to industrialize their economies. Unless they could implement the EU-India trade deal. I think the EU-India trade deal is the big price. As India is the big price geopolitically speaking, the EU-India trade deal is the big price economically speaking. I think Europe wants to use India as the new industrial base in order to feed Europe with industrial goods. I think this is the plan. I do not see anything else.
There is another component of representation that we would be remiss not to address, and that is Africa. You've pointed out the Russia and China complementary strategies there, and of course, we have all seen the embarrassing failures of both European states and the United States all over the continent, actually. But the two countries that have been rising slightly, at least in their economic relationship, in humanitarian relationships, if not as a military or political influences, were India and Japan, who do maintain positive and somewhat growing relationships, at least in parts of Africa. To what extent do you see these powers coming and filling in the vacuum where US and France have not been able to provide a clear and compelling strategy and engaging strategy, and kind of shift away the focus from this colonialist, anti-colonialist narratives that Russia and China have been taking advantage of? What can they play sort of a bridging role in Africa?
Well, Africa, I think in the near future will be a great region about if we want to speak about geopolitics. I think Africa emerges as a primary source of rare earths. As you may know, rare earths represent now a strategic source because it's been used on semiconductors, and semiconductors right now are like oil and natural gas. The natural gas of the future will be the semiconductors. So Africa contains a vast majority of natural sources. So I think that the complementary cooperation between Russia and China aims to take the leverage and take those sources and keeping the Western powers from retaking it. I think that the Western powers, they have a great puzzle to solve also in this region. As we speak right now, many countries are facing military attacks to the governments, promoted by Wagner Group, mainly by Wagner Group, and the China offers the diplomatic and economic support. I think that the US will need to maintain some relations with the African countries. France is already out of Africa. I don't think that there is a scope of returning to Africa for France. As we saw in Sahel region, France does not maintain any good relation with the governments right there. So I think only the US remain to establish, let's say, some good relations. As I know, the US tries. The US try to make a new trade route to Angola and I think the Republic of Congo. These two countries are really crucial to Africa. The US tries to maintain a good relationship and exert economic influence. I see that the USA will follow, let's say, a Chinese strategy. As China uses diplomacy and economy, I think the US now will use also its economy to maintain good relations and try to block China and Russia. I think that this is something really difficult because the people of Africa they do not want the Western powers. They think that they are colonial powers, even right now. So this is how history goes through our analysis, and we need it. I think Africa is going to be a tough region. A tough region for the West. I think it's a big question. A big question lies upon Africa as we speak about some kind of Western strategy.
But
we need to see.
But to the extent India and Japan are Western friendly, but also non-Western countries, do you think they can play that role of facilitating these issues for the West, or at the very least being kind of a bridge between, this anti-colonialist push and also the need for closeness with, Western friendly countries?
You're right about that. Yes, India and Japan, they are anti-colonial, let's say, powers, but in my opinion, they are not capable of exerting influence to Africa. India, as I told before, is a balanced actor for now. India has a different, let's say, cultural aspect about diplomacy. Indians, they are a very soft. It's a soft power, let's say. The Indian culture is a soft one. On the other hand, China proves to be a very aggressive power in terms of diplomacy and economic infiltration. On the other hand, we have Japan. Japan has a primary role on preventing China from exerting influence to Chinese Sea. I think Japan is not capable of exerting influence to Africa because its role is determined. The role of Japan is to hold and support countries like Taiwan or South Korea. This is the role of Japan. Even though Japan has a very big GDP, of course, the gross domestic product of Japan is a high one. No doubt of that. But I think the Japanese government will focus on China. The Japanese, they fear a lot China. I think this is their primary goal, and not to try to help the Western powers to maintain good relationships with the African nations. I think Japan is far from holding such a role.
So it doesn't have the capacity beyond more regional, even if to counter China's expansion to Africa and control of rare earths and natural resources.
Exactly. I think the role of Japan is Japan is a part of the chain of the countries that serve the American strategy of blocking China on Chinese Sea, like Philippines, like Japan, like Taiwan, like South Korea, like Singapore, or like Thailand. Indonesia is also a very important country, but in the future we'll see what will happen with Indonesia, because the US try to relocate some companies also in Indonesia. I think Indonesia will emerge as a very important country in the near future. We'll keep that in our mind. So I think, yes, the role of Japan is determined. There is no other role for Japan.
So I have a final question that's a little bit of a trick question, referencing back on what you said earlier about Greece and its special and different relationship to the Middle East as opposed to Western Europe. And we are seeing a huge vacuum of power with the US not being able to, let's just say, stick to any sort of comprehensive strategy to the Middle East. Everything seems to be backfiring. Abraham Accords are not, have not been well substantiated. They've been challenged by Israel's war with Hamas and by the rise of Iran in the region, at least as much as by the war, in my opinion, if not more. And there's a return of kind of Islamist and populist elements to the Middle East. There's a rise of China and Russia influences. There is the rise of US isolationism and various conflicts and all sorts of things going on. To what extent can Greece and the fact that it has had a tremendous global relationship in that part of the world and trade relationship and very, very positive economic relationship, can there be a sort of alignment of interest that is a closer coordinated, where Greece can play more overall? It has already to some extent on the energy front, but can it be more than that?
Well, this is a very big conversation about my country's actions. I'm going to say my opinion, but I'm going to also say the reality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start with the reality. The reality is that Greece right now forms a part of the whole European zero strategy. This is the reality. Greece has decided to align completely with European Union, which of course is part of European Union. Greece, no doubt of that. I do not say that Greece should not be part of the European Union. But this also affects, let's say, the external policy in some aspects, at least. In the last years, by the way, Greece has taken a lot of steps. Greece has maintained good relationships both with Egypt, a very important country of the region, and Israel, also a strategic partner of Greece. Greece right now offers to Israel a great strategic depth. As you may know, Israel lacks strategic depth. So Greece has maintained a very good relationship with Israel. This is really important also for Greece and for Cyprus. And of course, Greece has a strategic relationship with Saudi Arabia. Right now, Greek patriots guard Aramco, the huge oil industry of Saudi Arabia, and of course with the United Arab Emirates, which Greece maintains also a good relationship. By the way, the United Arab Emirates, they have also Rafale aircraft, air jets. Greece also has Rafale air jets. So, by keeping this on our mind, we can say that Greece, yes, it can be a spearhead of a potential European strategy in order to have a good step on the Middle East region. Of course, right now, as the war between Hamas and Israel keeps going on, it's really difficult to make any move. And of course, we have Turkey, which also forms a part of the whole region, which also causes some problems. Greece has its has its face on Turkey for other reasons. So this is another analysis. But generally speaking, in my opinion, Greece, since the ancient times, it maintains a historical and cultural footprint on the region. I think Greece should leverage the situation and take actions about this. Greece should use its cultural footprint on the region. This is something that the Greek government, at least for now, does not have implemented. This is something weird, but this is the reality. Greece should have taken a lot more steps. Unfortunately, in the Middle East right now, Greece does not maintain let's say, a strong cultural influential footstep. This of course can be changed in the near future, but for now, as we speak, Greece has decided to align with the US and the European Union. So it forms a part of the chain. I don't know if in the near future will use its influence in the region, but I will mention that yesterday the Prime Minister of Greece visited Egypt in order to support an EU assistance for the Egypt, about 7 billion euros assistance for the Egypt. And this is the crucial part of Greece, because Greece, at least for Egypt, which is a very important country, if Egypt destabilize itself, it will become a really tough situation, both for Europe and the US. So it's really crucial to maintain Egypt, and Greece should play a role between Egypt and the European Union. This is the role for Greece, at least for now. And of course, Greece it stands its ground and see what's happening with Israel-Hamas, because as the war goes on, I don't think that Greece will take any step in the Middle East. Right now, the whole world watches the Israel-Hamas. I think a lot depend on what will be the final ending of this conflict.
Thank you so much for your valuable insights. It was very, very fascinating, and I certainly hope to have you back on different conversations and discussions in the future. And I hope you continue to share these very interesting historical parallels. I think you're quite correct. I think we stand to learn a lot from historical patterns, and a lot of it can be used to predict some of the geopolitical trends based on some of the interests that don't particularly change all that much. And and I think we could do a lot better in that respect. To those watching us, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I hope, as always, it was interesting and that you learned a lot from it. And we'll be back next week, Tuesday night at 9 p.m. as usual, the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and have a great evening. Thanks.